Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych.
Welcome to the show. Here we are, live on tape.
Live. On.
You know what? We both have some surprises for each other.
We do?
Mine is a happy birthday.
Woo! Yes, that's right. And by the time people will see this, I'll be even older.
Yes, so you are aged, and I've been thinking about this.
Yes.
It's kind of like a perpetual birthday because anyone who watches this, it's your birthday again.
Well, you know, I feel like I'm in a perpetual birthday. It's sort of like Groundhog Day again. Last year, on April 2nd, they announced that there would be a stay-at-home order in Florida starting at midnight. So I enjoyed my birthday, and then we did the stay-at-home order, and I wound up giving up my old office and then realizing I wanted to be with you. So there we go.
Thank God for the pandemic.
Oh my God, the blessings of COVID. It was, you know, the crazy thing is it's 1 year now, and it's, 2 weeks to flatten the curve is all I can tell you.
I know, pretty soon they're gonna make you start wearing masks.
The gift.
Oh wait, when was this recorded?
Giving. We're not going to talk about this because we're talking about rods and orbs today. But first,
I need a moment of zen.
A mental wealth tip.
I mean mental wealth tip.
Because we all need to be mentally wealthy.
I get those mixed up, the moment of zen and mental wealth, kind of like deja vu and menage a trois, or flammable and inflammable. Who'd have seen that one coming?
Well, valuable and invaluable. I mean, who would know?
So wrinkle my gray matter, sir. What's the mental wealth tip of the day?
First, if there's nonchalant, is there chalant? I mean, I don't know. Okay, the mental wealth tip of the day is that people talk about an inner critic. The inner critic is not really an inner critic. It's the voice of our early caregivers giving us a hard time. It's kind of more of something we inherit rather than is a part of ourselves. I guess we may make it a part of ourselves. So if you have an inner critic, best get working on it because it can destroy your life.
But we all have an inner critic, and sometimes that's a good thing, right? Like, you better not touch that hot stove. I told you not to do that.
Well, that's more of just common sense. I think the inner critic tells you, don't say how you're feeling. Don't take care of yourself. Your needs don't count. Anger is power. It's not safe to be angry. You're powerless. And it turns into what I think you and I might call the unhealthy ego. It tells addicts to use and that they'll never get better, and don't go to AA because you're never getting better anyway. You might as well just drink now and give it up. We deal with this every day.
Well, so one interesting artifact about thinking about the inner critic is it forces you to pay attention to your mind and consciousness, and that you're not a computer program where that when you have a thought, you compulsatorily have to have an action. And
well, I think for a lot of people that they feel they do it, part of the therapy is to get people to not act immediately on that critic.
Exactly, which is kind of in line with rods and orbs, because
and what a very smooth segue.
It was a nice segue, but
really
I had rehearsed that because there is a big gray area in the world of orbs and rods. And while the show is on orbs and rods, it's really on perception and consciousness, and orbs and rods are a good example of how to bring that out. So thank you for the mental wealth tip. Without further ado, let's talk about some orbs. Are they like the little Orbeez that my kids watch on TV that you put in the pool and everyone jumps in and then they become YouTube millionaires?
Well, it could be if you have a certain kind of camera.
Or, is it okay?
Is it the same? Do we attach?
We fixed it.
Okay.
So take a look at this picture. Since clearly we gave Austin the day off here today, I'm having to do this all by myself, but this is your classic orb, as people like to think of it. What better place to go to find spirit orbs than a cemetery? And here's a grave site with fresh flowers that I'm assuming those are plastic, and a little angel watching over. Or in this case, I think the spirit orb is watching over the angel, but this is a picture of the classic spirit orb.
Okay, that's pretty big
What
orb.
say you? What say you? Do you like that?
Well, sure, and that's since it looks like more of a painting, you can't blame it on a camera lens flare.
Yeah, I can blame it. I can blame anything. There are ways you don't want to know.
Okay.
But the interesting thing, and we were talking about this before the show, between orbs and rods is they both can easily be recreated or reproduced. However, the big gray area and where thought and consciousness and awareness comes in are really the ones that can't be explained yet, or are suggestive of something else. But the classic orb, right, is an artifact that has exploded, especially since the advent of digital cameras, because of well, a variety of reasons that we talk about. But basically, a reflection like off a piece of dust like that, or let me show you a whole host of them, because
Okay.
there is what's interesting about the phenomenon is it can come in many shapes, colors, sizes. Take a look at this. So here we got a lot of different examples. Some are blurry, some are clear, some are round, some are stretched or egg-shaped or oblong. But you know, the universe preserves entropy and favors entropy. So the
I have a
circle would be the
question. I have a
lowest energy
question. I have a
state.
question. Which one of them is the coronavirus?
I don't know. I think the one with the spikes. I did find one that kind of looked like a coronavirus, but you know, now that we've mentioned it, we're going to be banned from YouTube again. So,
Well, what the
way to
heck?
go!
We
Started
didn't
off
we didn't
such a
say
great
it
show.
didn't exist. We just said it was resembling coronavirus. Hey, it's one thing to have a picture of this, but if you talk to somebody who's seen one of these things, they don't think it's just lens flare. I mean, I have one of my patients who is not psychotic in the least, um, has seen them. He's photographed them too. But the more important thing is that he has seen them, and that's he ran and got his camera. For him, they are real.
Well, so that the big difference there is it was seen with the naked eye before the camera.
Exactly.
If you want to debunk orbs, you can do so very quickly, similarly to rods, because it's so easily reproducible in a way that I would say the untrained eye looks identical. I would think 99+% of these are just a phenomenon from a photography called backscattering, right? That's like
Yeah.
a near camera reflection. You know, if my hand's really close to the camera or my ring or something, and then there's a flash, some of that light, um, will reflect back, which with much greater intensity. Well, why? Because light intensity is inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the source, which is one of the elegant natures of the universe. But it's critical because the closer the dust is, or pollen, but or in the case of rods, maybe an insect, the more likely it is to be translucent, very, very bright, or clearly stick out because of the scatter.
Is
And more
that
so
more?
if you,
This sounds so simplistic, but is that more rods or cones, or is that kind of camera, um, not trickery, but artifact is a better word.
yeah,
Uh,
it can be an
Either one.
artifact inside the lens itself, but typically this is just dust in the air, which is always there. We don't
Hmm.
see dust very well. Everyone has seen it. Like if you see a really bright light coming in a dark window, dark room, or the classically is like in the
Yeah.
Bagley movie theater. If you look up at the projector, you can see the dust in front of that really intense light, or the old projectors, overhead projectors. You could also see this as well, but it's usually not detected by the eye. And don't forget, cameras can also pick up infrared, um, as they get more and more advanced, most digital cameras have a capability to pick up some, if not primarily infrared. You can set them to infrared modes, or they automatically set. Like people that catch, I should include the video, but once again, you can find it on YouTube at the Space Museum over in Titusville. They made the news because one of their, I guess, evening security cameras caught a pretty fun looking orb wandering through there, and we're trying to decide as a community if that's John Glenn or a piece of dust.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny that you would bring up John Glenn, because that's exactly where my mind went when he saw the fireflies on that first orbital flight, and they've never explained it.
Well, in Fireflies, I can't remember that. I haven't watched that video lately, but to me, that could have been similar to a rod phenomenon. But the easy to explain orb ones are just dust. Like I was in Boston, and I went to the Boston Cemetery, which is right smack in the middle of Boston. It's pretty cool. And I took a bunch of pictures with Sony digital cameras that just come out, the little ones that you would always like drop in the toilet. And I couldn't not take a picture and get multiple orbs. And I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot of pollen here, or there's a whole lot of spirits wandering around.
Could be both,
And it's a busy place. It's right smack in the middle of, the Boston Commons is basically downtown. It's, but it was interesting because it got me thinking a lot more about that, whether that's something digital cameras are better at picking up or they're worse at ignoring. Is probably a better way to think of it.
Well, I don't really know, because when I used to do the old stuff, I did a lot of photography before digital came out, and I just called it lens flare. I'd get them all the time.
So I think I got a good picture.
And the reason that I would go there is that I didn't see them with my own eye. It's not like it was there and then I took a picture of it. You could look through the viewfinder and you'd see that there was a flare, and then you'd look out and there wasn't. Now, on the other hand, I have had one particularly amazing incident that I hadn't thought of till we started talking about this show. And I've seen one of these things, and it was amazing.
An orb or a rod?
It was a rod. It was a rod. And it was so freaky that I saw it out of the corner of my eye, hanging in the air. I was in a back road in the middle of the state with nobody around. I pulled the car over, and I got out of the car to look at it. It was just hanging in the air, and it defied the laws of physics. It was just hanging there like this. Things in the air, they need to go this way, they need to go this way, they need to go some way, otherwise they fall down. It was just sitting there. And I literally, it was so weird. I pinched myself really hard to see if I was awake. I thought I was dreaming it. And then it was so odd because it was here, maybe it was 1,000 feet in the air, and it was big. And then, like, you take a light switch, it was all the way up in the sky. It didn't travel there. It was here, then it was here. And I'm watching it, like, sitting there, like, in awe by myself. And then it was gone. And I remember thinking, did I make that up? I found pictures on the internet. In fact, we found one when we were preparing for this show that looked very similar to what I had seen. Something was there. Now, so could it have been a holograph? Maybe they were doing experiments from MacDill Air Force Base, which was maybe 25 miles or within 50 miles of where I was. I guess so. But that thing looked real. I mean, it was something.
And why do they always show up in graveyards and Air Force bases? I find that.
I don't know. I'm just guessing because I was my first thought, because MacDill was within 50 miles of where I was. I'm guessing 25, 50 miles. But that would be a hell of a stretch, yeah, I would think.
Well, so check this out. You were talking about lens flare. This picture was created actually by a digital camera in the dark, taking a picture of a remote control end on as somebody hits a button to trigger the infrared signal to the TV, and are moving or smearing the image. And so you get this artifact, which is a lens flare phenomenon. It's, in this case, it's an infrared lens flare. And it can create an image like this. which is interesting and unique.
Well, I mean, you know, if you look at what you can do with what do they call them? Authentic fakes or something?
Deep
What are they?
fake.
Deep fakes. You know, I don't know. I don't get out much. Um, it's amazing, and pretty soon we're not going to be able to tell what anybody said about anything.
I mean, how do we know that we're really here, that we really exist? I mean, this could
Talking
just
about me and you, or just in general, people.
you and me. Maybe, maybe,
Well,
maybe we're like Max Headroom and we don't know it, and we just live solely on the internet. It's a terrifying thought.
actually, I don't find that all that terrifying. Um, if it's true,
Good.
then there's nothing I can do about it, and if it's not true, we're all good. You know, so what the heck?
Well, so why does an orb tend to hover around one person? Now
I don't know,
that's
but actually, it's more terrifying to me that you might not be real and I am, or I might not be real and you are. As long as we're in the same place, I feel comforted, you know. Uh,
well, it seems like the universe created itself because it was bored, so that could be the case.
could be, could be. So
But
you were asking at why do orbs go to one person?
I mean, there's 99 ways that we could talk about orbs, what they are, how they're an artifact of the lens, backscatter, movement, phenomenon, intensity. We could talk about that. That's actually the quickest, fastest, most logical, and seemingly thorough explanation of orbs. I like when they are unexplained. So there
Well,
are
wait a second. How many unexplained ones do we have to have before the phenomenon is real? Just one. We just have one. Just need one. Got it. There you go. See?
But I mean, arguably, if this is dust and pollen, how come one piece of dust and pollen tends to follow around one person, almost like a poltergeist or something?
It's pretty good question.
Especially
Um,
children.
yes.
So
It,
that doesn't fit, like the pollen, dust, humidity, raindrop. Speaking of raindrops, I got an interesting picture here of a interesting raindrop phenomenon. Tell me if you can figure out how in the world this is happening.
okay.
So this is one of the explanations that people come up with why orbs are not simply dust, because how would dust move upwards like this so consistently? Look, there's several images here.
I don't know. How does that, how do you explain that one?
So this is actually a picture of water droplets and backscattering occurring from falling rain. Now, the interesting thing is when rain falls, this is the shape that the droplets take based on, gravity, wind currents, acceleration, terminal velocity. It's actually common. It's not like it's an updraft or anything like this. So it's a little counterintuitive looking at it, because we tend to think of teardrop shaped, it would be upside down.
right,
But actually,
sure.
this is a well-known phenomenon of light scattering from raindrops. So these are examples of moisture scattering, or rain hitting the flash of the camera. That's kind of fun. So enough about all the stuff it's not. Like I said, the fun ones are when they behave oddly. So when they're seen with the naked eye, that rules out the flash phenomenon. When they tend to hover around the same person who gets pictures various places over various times, and there's always an orb hanging around this person's head, that's a little bit more head scratching. Ones that move and change shape. So there have been videos, again, that could be deep fake, could be doctored, but if the orb is itself a spirit energy in its lowest energy state, for it to manifest itself, it has to change shape from the orbs. And indeed, there are videos, and I didn't include any videos because I figured they're just more likely to be caught as ripoffs, because I can't find a lot of them, but they're out there where an orb starts and then it will actually begin in front of someone's eyes, or a video camera, which is slightly different than a digital flash. It will change shape and it will become an ether or a vapor. And vapor eventually may take form, and it's usually of a human form. And if it continues to go further, it will actually appear like an actual ghost with features and You can find a lot of times see details like a bloody nose on the ghost, or their garb, whatever they're wearing. That's not dust. That's harder to explain with the dust, pollen, water theory.
Well, I think that, everything depends on, what you believe about this stuff. But if you talk to somebody who seems reputable and they say, well, I saw this thing and I ran and got my camera, that's pretty profound. I wished I had a camera that day. I didn't, this before the these things became ubiquitous. But that would seem pretty real to me. And you talk to people who've seen them, they're rock solid that it's real. Now, of course, as you and I have noted in the past, people, really can be changed by their hallucinations and they can create all kinds of things. But I don't think it explains everything.
No, it doesn't. And this is why we've talked about extremism, and it's something that I'm very shy of. I don't like absolutism or extremism. Like, well, this is an unidentified flying object, therefore let's leap to it being space aliens.
Well, I like the idea that that it's unidentified. I could leave it at that.
That's what Neil deGrasse Tyson always says. The U is unidentified. How do you make the leap to intergalactic alien beings visiting across light years of time and space? And
well, once you realize that we get lied to repeatedly, it could be anything.
The opposite side of the extremism is taking something like orbs and saying all of them are spirits. Okay, because we know that we can very quickly and easily reproduce a lot of these artifacts. But, and this is why it's in line with consciousness, what about the ones that aren't explained? Because that's where the real excitement is. That's the juice of it. That's the learning. That's the thinking and the conscious awareness. Like, okay, well, I understand all of that, but then how come that doesn't explain this? Because then at the very least, there's something that we can learn about the physical world. And at the very best, there's something we could learn about the spiritual world.
Bingo.
I know,
But
Jack, and me.
but it's at the order of how do you prove something like this? So remember that great scene in Contact, where the movie Contact, where
Yes.
she says, well, I need proof that God exists, and he goes, really, do you love your father? And she says, yeah, and he says, prove it. I mean, there are things that are Western measurements measure, and we kind of believe if we can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Well, that's patently not accurate. There you go.
Here's another one. Now, this one I won't get too much into, but this one's slightly more controversial because it lacks the homogeneity in the orb structure itself. I'm not an orbologist, but I do know that a lot of people study these images, and they're less likely to say every single one of them is a piece of pollen or dust or an artifact, because some are actually translucent, which a piece of dust probably wouldn't be, couldn't be, shouldn't be. Arguably much bigger than a photon coming from the flash itself. This one has a couple, one kind of an egg-shaped one down there, and also this round one. But you can kind of see when they start to change in form and shape and size, usually the first indicator of that, at least on video evidence, is a change in that homogeneity that you're seeing here. So this one's kind of a famous photograph. I forget where I borrowed, depending where you are in the country and or world listening to this from. But it's come up a lot. It's kind of all over the internet because it's considered to be one of the examples of I guess a more veridical spirit orb.
Well, okay. If as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about the kinds of interpretations that people put on these things. Uh, what I've heard, oh, well, this is my dead brother who, coming to say hello, um, or these are angels, um, and of course, that's just emotional. I mean, there's no proof of that except people have these experiences.
Well, I want to move on to rods here pretty quick because
Let's move on to rods then.
the coup de grace, the finale,
The
spoiler alert,
the crude de rod
is our comments on why rods and orbs and the coup de rod even matter. And it's a, you know, spoiler, it's a little bit about what you said, that really the effect that it has on people, and more importantly, the way that they think about it, analyze it, I think is the most important message of today's show. But so orbs, you know, that's scratching the surface, the very surface of orbs. If we move on to the next rod section, we're going to see something a little bit like this. That keep in mind, we're still in the graveyard here. All right, because the best stuff always occurs in the graveyard, right? This arguably,
or a Chevy before they only had bucket seats.
it could be a Chevy. It could be a dragonfly. It could be an interdimensional being. It could be something really cool we don't even know about yet. To me, it looks like it's going to eat that grave there. But I guess rods in cryptozoology and the world of ufology, which if you just type rods into Google's, it turns out you don't get these images.
Well, you get curtain rods is what you get.
You get a lot of curtain rods.
If
Yeah.
you put rods UFO, you get this.
But you get this, sometimes called skyfish, air rods, or solar entities. I've heard them called fairies before, and I have a better picture of why. Sometimes they're mistaken as Tinkerbell. They're elongated visual artifacts here. You appear in photographic imaging and video recordings. So that's a little bit different. Although the video images of orbs typically have infrared light generated, but otherwise seeing them with the naked eye or on camera is less likely than a still picture. The majority of the orbs appear in still picture. The majority of rods actually appear in video, suggesting it's a motion phenomenon for sure, which has to do with screen capture rate and our eyeball. Our eyeball has a frame refresh rate that a lot of people never think about, but that's all a TV image is, right? Is a bunch of sequential images on so fast. The
Lots of lines, lots of lines.
More electron beams, but
medium cool.
They give them illusion of motion. You're just looking at a bunch of still images here,
right?
Very fast. So our eye actually samples very similar to a TV camera. It has a frame rate, which makes sense because neurons can only fire so fast. The actual photonic energy moves at light speed or near light speed, running through our atmosphere, bouncing off a tomato and entering your eye and hitting the rods and cones and generating a color red and defining visual borders and edges. And there's processing, there's sensory transmission. The neurons take time. They're actually much slower than the speed of light, much slower. So our eyeball can actually make the same errors and judgment as a video camera. However, what are we talking about? The ones that aren't as easily explained. When I was younger, I was really interested in rods because one of the theories, and actually one of my original thoughts on it, and I wanted to include a Carl Sagan video here because he did a really great video on I forget the name of it, but he was talking about flatland, what three-dimensional objects would look like to a two-dimensional being, you know, or if you start in one dimension, you have a single point, and then you go to two dimensions where you have a flat sheet. It's going to view the whole two-dimensional world as a bunch of collection of single points. It's never going to be able to see in two dimensions. We bring that up to our frame of reference, which is a little easier to understand. And we have three-dimensional space, but if we have two-dimensional a world here, and we got little ants living on here, and what Carl Sagan called flatland, and they know left, right, and forward and back, but up and down doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. So when a ball comes from the third dimension and passes through, all the beings on the page are going to see a point and then a circle, and then it's going to get bigger, and then it's going to get smaller as the ball passes through the page, and then it's going to disappear right before their two-dimensional eyes, and they're going to go, whoa, my little two-dimensional brain is blown. So let's take that up to a fourth dimension, which is a little conceptually more difficult, but it's
Getting ready. I'm
don't
ready
lie.
now. I'm ready for the fourth dimension.
You ready for the fourth dimension? What if we have a four-dimensional being stumbling through, much like the ball through the sheet, our three-dimensional world? That might explain how these rods seem to appear out of thin air, interact with three-dimensional space momentarily, and then disappear out of existence. A lot of times they jump in a way that a insect or mosquito or fly or dragon.
That would be like really different than pollen, right?
Very different than pollen. Although wind currents do funky little things that on the microscopic level, a piece of pollen might tumble like this through an eddy current that we would never see with our eyes.
Okay.
But it, appearing and disappearing might be the angle of reflection. There's a lot of thoughts about that. But I kind of like the interdimensional being.
Okay, there's probably no answer to this question, but I'm good at asking questions that have no answer.
I'm good in making up answers.
Good, we're a perfect team. What would you consider proof that these things are not just artifacts of the lens or pollen or an insect?
Well, similar to orbs, I think the people that are most interested in rods as a possible extra-dimensional creature, some sort of other life form, micro UFOs, it's been suggested, other paranormal proponents have noticed that these have, we're talking about John Glenn and the Fireflies, these have appeared many, many times outside of the space station. And there better not be any dragonflies flying around out there, or mosquitoes, or light artifact. You can go find these videos all over the interwebs. Some quite old, so less likely to be doctored, although you could arguably doctor old ones as well.
Well, there was a whole experiment they did with one of the space shuttles with a tether. I don't know if you remember that one. That was electromagnetic, and all these things started showing up that looked like orbs. Very odd stuff, very odd. To me, completely unexplainable by conventional explanations.
Let me get a close-up view of what is considered to be motion blurring, or a classic single viewpoint of a rod. Now, if you have a frame rate or shutter speed that's longer than the frequency of the wing beats itself of the insect, or some people even claim these are birds, but not too many people. Most people would argue they're about the size of an insect. Again, light, whether that's infrared, this is probably an infrared image, is showing almost this thing looking like it's corkscrewing through the air. But again, it's spread out because the interlaced video recording, like we were talking about before, creates these after image trails of each wing beat. The frequency of the wing beat is in this case faster than the sampling rate of the camera and or the eye itself. There's some variability. Humans, one of the things you may notice on the new TVs, well, they're not so new anymore, but you had the 60 hertz and then the 120 hertz. Some humans' eyes have a higher sampling rate. I don't know what that means. I think although I can't really even see what's going on because my eyesight's going down the crapper. I do think I have a little bit higher sampling rate because when you watch the newer true motion TVs, they irritate the crap out of me because your eye almost can pick up a harmonic artifact where the motion kind of looks jittery and artificial. What's interesting is a lot of people can't see that. So they cannot see the difference between a 60 hertz image from the 90s or older and the newer, faster refresh rates. So that shows that we're right on the cusp of these being just outside of the ability. Now, if we had like a high speed camera, like a 10,000 frame per second or something like they had Mythbusters had those early on. Do rods ever show up on those cameras? Probably not.
Well, they're not exactly in a guy in a boat in Pascagoula, very often. That's the problem.
Take it to a graveyard. You're the ones that stop the bullet going through the card or the
Yeah, I
apple.
know. That's
Let's get one of those suckers
you,
out and
you,
take
you
it to
can
the
buy
boat.
one of those at the Best Buy.
Oh yeah. So, oh wait, I got some more images here
All right, cool.
in the interest of time here. So that artifact of blurring, that frame rate, is very familiar in imaging of astronomy. So here is what happens if you point your camera up straight at the sky and you leave the shutter. We exaggerate this effect. We leave the shutter open. Everyone's familiar with this. Now the stars aren't blurry fireflies. We know that they're stars, but we see a similar type of phenomenon. Matter of fact, the trees themselves are blurred a little bit as wind has blown the leaves and the probably hours that it took to develop this particular image. But that's kind of a easier to understand example of image blur, which I think is pretty neat. And then lastly, if we really do a similar type of sampling and of image blurring of insects, this is the kind of image that you'd get. So this is a whole lot of interdimensional beings, possibly, or
Wow.
one moth that is really photogenic and possibly a little narcissistic.
I think I had a T-shirt like that once.
I find it fascinating, these images that can't be explained. And it brings to the purpose of the show is that people tend to trust their physical senses, which we have 5 arguably that we know of, and they believe their perceptions, even if they're hallucinating. We're convinced we're such prisoners of our biology, trying to understand and interpret the world. We rely heavily on our eyes, vision, more so than a lot of other animals. And so if our eyes fall outside of the normal sampling window, or if a stimulus falls outside of that, perception interpretation is sort of wide open based on the suggestibility of the user, the mood, the setting, their fears. Like you said, if they've recently lost a loved one, they're more likely to think and find comfort in spirit orbs.
Well, I mean, people will report,
Would be different.
all kinds of visitations after losing a loved one, and it's just a matter of interpretation. You know, I've had, as you know, I've had those experiences too. To me, they're real. If you had my brain on some kind of PET scan or something, you might have shown that I was, making it up, but certainly emotionally, it was real.
Or if you were snacking on mescaline, then
Well, yeah, that too, except that would just sort of leave me more or less where I am all the time.
well, and we learn a lot about the brain, and one of the theories is that there's ancient lower primitive parts of the brains, right? The part that the breathing, heart rate, hungry, horny, temperature regulation, a variety of endocrine processes. We don't ever think about that. Other than respiration, we can't really easily override some of these, although some people can slow and speed their heart rate. But
That was actually the genius of when they brought the yogis to Menninger's Institute in the 60s, and where biofeedback had its origins, was that
yeah,
you could do it, but you really had to practice.
yeah, and I think it's a good the show on biofeedback, which we're going to have a guest on that one. But it's a good explanation for biofeedback. One of the reasons that's been argued evolutionarily why this is not part of our conscious awareness or sentience is to save energy. The brain gobbles up, I think 70% all the glucose our body consumes. It's very, very, very hungry, and it must be preserved at all costs in order to ensure the survival of our species, an advancement to working all the way up on learning how to speak. We learn to talk convert in language, and then like Stephen Hawking says, we unleash the power of our imagination when we can communicate verbally. Learning how to use tools, what separates us from almost all other animals. But the same thing happens on higher order thinking. So that's called a cognitive homeostasis instead of the physiologic homeostasis. And, oh, I need to put some brain power into beating my next heartbeat. It's done at an unconscious level. It conserves energy. It conserves thought, worry. we too can do that on a super conscious or even conscious level. And that's a stable, familiar approach to processing information about our world. And it has been argued that some people might choose a belief or faith or religion as an energy, cognitive kind of conservation, energy preserving mechanism. That homeostatic function is preserved even in more complex brains and thinking.
Cool. Well, we're almost out of time. I'd like to leave you with a thought. Do you think that Rod Serling had anything to do with this?
The naming of rods?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be cool?
I wish I knew where I probably missed that. Where did rods come from? I mean, because they look more like corkscrews. Why
Yeah,
can't
they really do. But, I kind of like Rod Serling.
it'd be easier to search on the internet if I could type in corkscrews? Although I'd get a bunch of pictures of corkscrews. So
There you go. You would have opening of wine bottles.
Well, it's
Okay.
something to think about. I guess that's all the time we got for today. But
All right. That was fun.
time.
I like that. I like the way you wove in the skeptic with the unexplained. I enjoyed that tremendously.
Well, there was so much
So,
skeptic in both of these, but I want
all of
to
these.
think about the
So,
tiny unexplained
1,
sliver.
2,
Huh? Oh,
3.
me? Be
Be well.
well.
No,
Well,
you be well.
and so I am. And so it
See you
is.
next week, kids. And
All
Mark, I'll
right.
see you today.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the birthday wishes.
Konnichiwa.
Ah, yes.
Nagasaki.
Yeah, that too. Don't touch my mustache.
I'll smell you later.